I will continue discussing the situation on the occupied peninsula and in the Black Sea with Dmitry Pletenchuk, spokesperson for the Naval Forces of the Armed Forces of Ukraine. Mr. Dmitry, greetings to you. Glory to Ukraine.
Glory to the heroes. Greetings to Irina, the studio, and the viewers.
Let's start with the operational updates. What is the current presence of the Russian fleet in the Black Sea? Is there a threat of an airstrike or from vessels?
The absence of their presence has already become a constant situation. You could probably already call it the calling card of the so-called Russian Federation's Black Sea Fleet. And in fact, that's a good thing. But let me remind you, this didn't happen by chance, but as a result of the work of Ukraine's defense forces, particularly the Navy. As for the carriers of cruise missiles, they also remain at their base. Of course, we consider this threat to be present because, in principle, over the past month, they did use them once. And in general, they periodically prepare for such uses. But we are also monitoring the situation accordingly.
The Russian fleet in the Black Sea and the Azov Sea has been effectively neutralized. This is a maritime battlefield where the defense forces have completely seized the initiative. This is what you're talking about and what Commander-in-Chief Alexander Syrsky mentioned the other day while in Odessa. I suggest we elaborate on this conclusion based on the results of May. So in your opinion, what are the main objectives that have been achieved? What did the defense forces strike?
Well, we can take, for example, last night as well. Events took place in Crimea that are usually referred to as cotton in our information space. And these events are also happening according to plan. The targets, the target bank, are gradually being processed accordingly. And again, various components of the defense forces of Ukraine are involved in this. At the same time, going out to sea and not so much acting freely, but even just carrying out their main tasks. In principle, as of now, the representatives of the Black Sea Fleet of the so-called Russian Federation are basically not ready for this. For this, they mostly use aviation, but that's more about defense now. So yes, here the strategic initiative continues to remain firmly on our side. And of course, that is incredibly important. However, significant threats and challenges still persist, such as the drones that once again approached and entered from the direction of the sea late last night. Unfortunately, this persistent threat is still very much present today. But that's already a slightly different story.
And let's talk about a slightly different story which also affects the front, because gasoline and fuel are what the Russian army runs on. Crimea without fuel, gasoline being rationed, all of this is thanks to the logistical lockdown announced by Mikhailo Fedorov, the Minister of Defense. This is the kind of drone control over highways in the temporarily occupied territories deep in the enemy's rear. The Taganrog-Jankoy highway. You could say that right now it's empty of fuel trucks. What made this possible? And in your opinion, will it stay empty for long?
This is what I have repeatedly mentioned on air before, that the Russians are now placing the main logistical burden essentially on the so-called land corridor, which they named as one of the goals of the so-called special military operation. But it has a major drawback. Compared to other logistical routes, it is relatively close to the line of combat engagement. Accordingly, at some point, they were bound to start getting hit there. Well, finally, that moment has come. And yes, this will be a problem for the Russians, but mostly it will be a problem for ordinary Russians, for illegal tourists who are planning to go to Ukrainian Crimea, or directly for those who are permanently in Crimea. Because yes, the logistics, they are vulnerable. Such logistics are vulnerable. At the same time, I am sure that the military will continue transporting despite the losses. This is also standard practice for the Russians. At some point, they just have to realize that the percentage of fuel trucks that don't make it is higher than those that do. That's when they'll start to feel it. But yes, ordinary residents of Crimea, as well as the not so ordinary ones who have come there, as they say in Russia, panakali, they are already feeling the problems and even posting about it online, which in principle is quite risky on Russian territory.
Are the Russians trying to step up their air defense because of this and unblock the land supply corridor?
The issue is that it takes quite a long time to respond to new threats, to new challenges. That's how it has always worked. These are the realities of any war. And when you find such a tool, a kind of master key that can open up certain opportunities, your enemy needs to spend some time to somehow neutralize it. And the kind of threat that we have created for the Russians, particularly on this logistical route from Rostov to Jankoy, will be quite difficult to neutralize because this tool is quite broad in its application. It is exceptionally mobile. And there is no single centralized system that once you hit it, you can completely eliminate the entirety of the issue for good. No. So yes, right now they are facing a serious challenge, and I'm not sure that over at least this summer they will be able to really make any significant impact on it.
Mr. Dmitro, but they do have the Kerch Bridge, as they call it, or the Crimean Bridge, as an alternative. Why isn't it being used for transportation, particularly for fuel?
I think we will see that moment. We've also discussed this repeatedly on air, that at some point when they're really pressed, they will probably be forced to start transporting dangerous cargo across the bridge. There are restrictions there. The restrictions are quite serious, both regarding fuel and lubricants, as well as certain types of cargo, and also for rail transport. This applies both from a security standpoint and because of the damage that the so-called Crimean Bridge sustained earlier. But when they really have nothing left to refuel with, and when their reserves of military equipment are depleted, they will be forced to use this logistics route as well. Moreover, as of now, ferry transportation is once again impossible for them due to the damage or destruction of the railway ferries. Regular ferries cannot handle such cargo volumes, and the railway ferries are currently not operating.
Mr. Dmitro, you probably know and have already noticed over the past few years that when the Russians deploy their special units of UAV operators, such as Rubicon and Judgment Day on land, on the front line, this means that for them this is a strategic direction. And now the Institute for the Study of War, citing partisans from the Atesh movement, has reported that the Russian command is being forced to redeploy UAV and electronic warfare operators from the front lines in the east to protect the Crimea-Rostov route. First of all, do you observe, or is it even possible to observe, such redeployments? And in your opinion, does this mean that it is important for them? How much will this affect the front? That is, will it make things easier for our defenders?
We should not forget that this route is not only about supplying Crimea and the groups stationed there. It is also about supplying the groups in the south, that is the occupied Kherson region and Zaporizhia. So, in principle, by the activity on this route, you can observe all those groups that are supplied by this connection. By the way, there's also a railway there, but it too periodically receives some heated attention. Well, I'm sure that those working on our side will immediately notice changes in the situation. And again, it will be quite difficult because we are talking about protection that must be systemic. And there's this path. It's quite long. You will simply get tired of searching the entire contact line for operators who work on it. So yes, it will be quite difficult.
And Odessa, that means the threat still exists. We have a little over a minute. Tell us, how much are you fortifying? Without details, of course, but still. What scenarios are you considering for a Russian offensive?
Regarding fortification, these are planned measures. There's no emergency at the moment. They are being carried out, basically taking into account the likelihood and possibilities. Our main problem right now, of course, is the use of kamikaze drones by the Russians, with which they terrorize the Odessa region. The situation with ballistics has eased a bit now. They haven't used them for a long time. But as for the drones, yes. Last night, everyone in Odessa was repelling them again. The Naval Forces in particular also have drone shoot-downs to their credit, and this is basically the main problem. But now they are actively intensifying their concerted efforts to launch targeted strikes against not only the essential port infrastructure, but also the vital civilian infrastructure that people rely on daily. This is currently our main challenge and what we are fighting against.
Half a minute. What would you say to viewers who are going to the beaches today and have decided to swim in the sea anyway?
First and foremost, follow safety precautions. If you see anything unfamiliar or something that looks unfamiliar, immediately leave the area as far as possible. If it's an anti-ship mine, keep at least 1 kilometer away. And accordingly, call any emergency service, whether it's 101 or 102. Either way, we will come. Don't forget that in half of the cases, these mines explode on their own before anyone arrives.
Thank you very much for this advice. At 9 o'clock, as is tradition, we will honor our fallen defenders. We were joined by Dmitry Pletenchuk, spokesperson for the Naval Forces of the Armed Forces of Ukraine.